I'm a full-stack web developer, and I'm currently enjoying JavaScript. I'm not enjoying it as much as I hoped I would, because most libraries I've come across have some serious issues with their APIs, and I want to give you some pointers on what you can do to ensure people actually love using your stuff. There's three simple things you have to keep in mind when building tools. Make them simple, make them flexible, and make them stable. Being simple is not really making it easy to use. It's more about being consistent with your function definitions, with your argument order, making it obvious what your API actually does, making it predictable. So if I know how function 1 works, I can assume function 2 will work in a similar way. So this is something you come across in PHP quite often. I don't know why, but you see the arguments, they don't align. Haystack, needle, they switch around. There's other issues. Search array, search underscore array. You have uppercase, you have lowercase. Just once you figured out what arguments your methods actually take, make sure every other method taking a similar amount of arguments accepts the same thing. Then this is JavaScript, this is not PHP, so don't make me as the user of your tool know if I'm working with an object, with a hash map, or with an array, or with a string. Just do those type checks within your API and offer me a simple search function rather than search in array. You can figure it out, and I only have to know there's one single function, search, and it will do what it's supposed to do. Being simple, like with the search example, is about keeping your API as small as possible. So from the more traditional languages like Java, you're used to setter function and getter function, functions being separate things. In JavaScript, we like to have a single function and have the function decide if it's a getter or a setter. So in JavaScript, we often like to deliberately break the CQS, the command query separation principle, by simply checking, is that what we got? Something? If so, it's a setter. If it's nothing, if it's undefined, we're obviously trying to get some data. Being a good API means you know how people use you, the API. Which means you know when there will be repetition. I'm repeating stuff just for the sake of repeating stuff. This is not fun to code. In a setter style, I'm always repeating the function, the element I'm working on. This is a bad thing, because I could simply be accepting a map. All I need is a key and a value for a setting operation. So why not just accept a map? Iterate through that map and do the setting of the individual keys yourself. So moving on to looping. Looping is something we do all the time. Especially when we're working with DOM, you're getting all the divs on the page, and you have to loop through them. You're getting all the input elements, and you're looping through them. In this example, we just want to set the value of an input field to a defined default value we've given in the HTML5 data attribute default. And manually, we will be doing something like that, which sucks because we have to take care of the looping. This is just boilerplate code that annoys me. Your setter function could simply be accepting a callback function. You know you're dealing with a collection of items. So in the case, I provide you a function, just iterate through your collection and apply the callback function to every single element. You're writing the code for the looping once, and I don't have to care about it. I'll just give you a function. I don't care if it's a collection or if it's a single item. It will just work to me. It's transparent. Can anybody tell me what that one does? Obviously not. So this is a really bad thing to do. It's overloading your function definition with arguments nobody can remember what they do. In JavaScript, page PHP 2, we like to accept maps. This way, we can define what each value, each argument, actually means. We can switch around the order of arguments. We can omit arguments. This way, we can have another map in the background, merge the maps together, and we can have default values, something you couldn't have in JavaScript, well, up to ECMAScript 6. There will be default arguments there, but right now, this is the only way to do it. And this is comprehensible. I can come back to that code 2 weeks later and still understand, okay, that one was a button. It's a left click. Awesome. Well, being simple means keeping it simple. I think I forgot an internal frame there. It's like, don't do that. This is not some enterprisey JavaScript, some enterprisey Java. You are not working on compiled code. This is stuff that is actually transmitted to the browser. It's just ridiculously long. You don't remember how those classes are named. Keep it simple, keep it concise. As Albert Einstein said, everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. The second key to a successful API is flexibility. With any tool, you have to make the trade-off between what your core does and what your users want. Successful APIs will focus on the core, the hard stuff. We're moving the rocks. Some user comes along and says, yeah, but I want that rock to be green. This is not your problem. This cannot be your problem. You cannot extend your tools for every single edge case, so make them extensible. Especially in UI situations, any asynchronous situation, you can work with events. This is some demo code from jQuery, which actually allows you to define and use custom events, much like you might know from the DOM. You can go as far as adding any data you want. You can actually use the default prevention mechanism, so you can actually react to people, to events being aborted within your application. Or you can use callbacks. It's like, whenever I create a new dialog, run this init function, if it was supplied, and have it do whatever you want to do. Make it a red background. Whenever that dialogue is shown, displayed, there's an animation involved. Now, I like a simple fade in, but somebody else might like a transition from the left. Am I supposed to define every single possible animation? No. I just want you to provide a callback function, slide from left, and that's it. I'll just use that. And there's hooks. Hooks are pretty much like callback functions with the difference that they're defined once, usually globally. So in this case, this is a jQuery feature as well. CSS hooks, I can define a namespace, color inverted background, which allows me to define a setter and a getter. And whenever I access this non-existent thing, this function is executed. Those are the three basic principles to make your API flexible. So don't try to make it right for everybody. Get your core done right and allow the people to do what they want to do themselves. Being robust, being stable. It's a pretty fun thing. If you search for that on Google, you get a new Volkswagen model I haven't heard of before today. Being robust means being clever enough. You're being given data, you don't really know what it is. Registering a click event with an empty map on jQuery will work. It won't tell you, dude, you gave me something that is not a callback function. And whenever I click on the document, I get errors like these. Some error within jQuery. I have no clue what is going on, where I made that mistake. There is no stack trace pointing back to what I did wrong. I've been debugging errors like these with time frames of 2 to 6 hours. Don't waste people's time. If there is a certain type you expect, make sure you're given that type. You want a function? Make sure it is a function. Otherwise, tell me it's not a function. Fail early. This is very important. Being robust also means not being too clever. You know, in Java, there's method overloading. In JavaScript, we don't have that, so we only have one method. But we can dynamically check what the function signature actually looks like. So we can be given an integer, a string, a boolean, and we can decide what to do in each case. Now, jQuery has a toggle function, which pretty much shows and hides an element. It will take an integer of 1 second, which defines the duration of this animation. It will take a string, which is not the same as the integer 1. And it will take the boolean true, which will only show, not hide. This is incredibly hard to debug, because you could be getting these values of data attributes of your DOM nodes or from some user input. You yourself might not know if it's a string, if it's an integer, if it's a boolean. And this is a problem, because every time I use the toggle function, I have to make sure this is actually a boolean. So again, I'm writing boilerplate code, prone to error. The toggle 1 here is a particularly interesting thing. jQuery has this internal map, jQuery fx speeds, where you can actually define default speed for animation. And the string one does not exist. It's not a key in that map, so it will take the default duration. Another thing, incredibly hard to figure out. Don't be too clever. But to provide a good API, you obviously have to know your language. If I press run, what happens? I'm shown a dialog saying bonjour. Now, outside of the context of my object, I'm setting this attribute, this property, to another value. What do you think is happening here? It's overwritten. Objects are handled like references in JavaScript. There is no pass by reference per se, but objects are handled like references. And this is a problem. You have to know this. If you don't, I can pass you data, you initialize your stuff, and I change my original data, assuming you made a copy, which you didn't because you simply took the reference. This can screw up stuff really fun ways. So I'm a bit faster than thought. Do you have any questions?
No questions?
No questions? Okay. In that case, if this was too quick for you, there's an article on Smashing Magazine detailing much more than I showed you today. I would invite you to go ahead and read that article. It's rather long. It will take you some time, but it's worth it. Do it. Okay, thanks.